Okay, so hello, welcome to the final presentations of Sustainability in the Art Studio. We have been over this spring, researching how to embed our practices in a relationship with the land and our local communities. Both of those things make up our local ecosystem. And so we reviewed sustainability on a material level. So actually studying and learning about how to wildcraft our own art materials, how to think of our art materials as as teachers, but also as materials that are storied entities in themselves so we're sort of in collaboration with our ecosystem through engaging with the materiality of it. But then we also connected with well, I encouraged students to consider how they might embed their practices in their communities, because that's sort of how we sustain ourselves in our local ecosystems. And each student was given the green light to take on any research project that they wanted. And so we're going to see today some examples of the research projects that some of our students did. And unfortunately, quite a few were unable to join us today. We had about 10 in the class this spring. But today we're going to have 3 live presenters and 1 recorded presenter who is at last minute unable to make it. I also wanted to mention that we had, every time we teach this class through ecoartspace, and thank you so much, Patricia Watts, who's here, who is the incredible founder and host of ecoartspace. We run it twice a year. We're going to run it again in the fall. But every time we run the course, we have 2 guest artists who speak about their practices. And I'm just going to throw links in the chat to the 2 artists who we had the pleasure of working with this spring. First, we met with Johanna Tornqvist, and I'm sorry if I messed up her last name, but she makes jewelry and garments out of recycled textile and plastic materials. You can check out her work in the link I just sent. And then we also had Lucia Mong, who's a Peruvian artist whose work explores the ways humans position themselves within the natural world and relate to other living beings, especially plants. She's got some fantastic work too to check out. Lastly, I want to invite everybody who's here to leave a comment in the chat for each presenter about their projects. And some of them may have targeted feedback questions for you that they would love to get some feedback on. And I'm going to throw our lineup of presenters today in the chat. And so we're going to start with Robin Jourdan. And let me just make sure you can share your screen, Robin, 1 second.
Well, you have my presentation materials, I think.
What was that?
You have my presentation materials?
I do. Sorry. I have Mary Mattingly sent me hers at last minute, so I was looking that up. Okay. All right, here we go. And Robin, when you want me to go to the next slide, you can just say next slide or however you want to do it.
Right on.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. I am Robin Jourdan, also from Michigan. I think someone earlier in the today said they were from Michigan. So yay, Michigan, the Mitten State. This is my status presentation. If you could go to the next slide. Just a little quick level set on what got me to today. Starting off with the background of the work that I did, transitioning, experimenting, integrating was really the goals that I had set for myself. And that included things like skill development, sourcing pigments, sourcing materials, um, and then other kinds of media to replace the mass produced. That was um, a pillar of what I wanted to accomplish during this class. Excuse me. Thirdly, something that was important to me because it's a part of my current practice, and I wanted to be able to keep it and even strengthen it into this next evolution, is to refine my voice with what I call the voice of the materials. I'm a paper maker, and I like to let the materials have their say, if you will, in the finished pieces that are created. So it's more, I feel like I'm in more of a collaboration with the materials, and I don't overly impose my impose my will on them, if that makes sense. Um, Also, as I was working through this, and we had some discussions around, our values of what we want to bring into the next stage of our practice, I realized that eliminating waste was a big priority for me. But then I realized that if I focused on biodegrading materials and even within processes, that would take care of a few things, including excess waste. So I kind of adjusted to biodegradation and fun. It's got to be fun.
Mhm.
And really the sourcing, where these materials that I am using, where that comes from. Sometimes foraging is permitted, sometimes foraging is not permitted. So for my practice, and what I'm going to be discussing is um, naturally sourced uh, pigments for inks. And so for me, that became a kernel of awareness, is not every land is forageable, if you will. Next slide.
Mm.
So this is again some of the initial explorations into ink making. I made some cochineal ink, some black walnut ink, copper oxide ink, and there's a few of the bottles and little jars of ink that got me started and kind of got me hooked, if you will. So next slide.
Robin, sorry, I just want to pause for 1 second. There is somebody who's trying to get in, and my mouse disappears when I am in play mode. Okay, sorry about that.
No, no problem. Um, and so I wanted to, I'm also a printmaker. So one thing that was important to me, I was just kind of more out of curiosity, was how could I use these inks that I'm making in a printing fashion? And so what you're seeing there are literally some blobs of ink that got run through my printing press. And typically you would expect ink that was very liquid to just squirt and squish out when it's applied under a press. But some people had put up some techniques to try to mitigate those. And so that felt like a very successful, as you can tell, the inks kind of stayed in place. And there's some pools and puddles, but those were not a result of the printing press. Those were a result of how the ink spread on the plate. So next slide. Some further experimenting, just making some lake pigments and which is what a lot of those items on the left side of the screen are, and then some different techniques to use with the inks. The one in the middle with the paper kind of sticking out of that beaker. I was trying some paper chromatography processes of just ways of working with these inks. It's a new material for me. Was um, coming right out of being a 3D artist, and so kind of moving back into the 2D world. Um, kind of left me with some brain challenges, but I was able to play around and give myself the okay to please let my uh, imagination kind of take over. Next slide. Some of the things that I discovered about ink making from other ink makers, and this is something that I'm starting to see more of, is where inks are being kind of equated like wines, where there are people who can determine what in French, the terroir of a wine, and can identify it, where it came from, what region it came from, which potentially, down to the micro level of the origination of that wine. People are starting to do this also with natural inks. And so that's something that I'm planning to really investigate a little bit more. My background is in geography and cartography, so that was something that kind of connected to me in a novel way.
Mm.
Next slide. Um, for me going forward, I put to I have to kind of stop and give you a little bit in my background. We when we were when I was working, we would put together training plans. I guess that would be kind of a good generic term. Training plans for what we plan to do to go from the level of competence and expertise in a subject to where we were at the moment to where we thought we wanted to go. And so what you're seeing here is of those same uh, model thinking, but I applied them initially the to eco art. So I wanted to be able to take myself from what I consider to be, I named it an armchair eco artist. That, yeah, I was just baby steps. I was just conversational. I could, I couldn't really do much more than, read articles and leveled out some potential stopping points, where I feel like today I'm in the what I'm calling aviator stage, because I'm starting to take concrete steps towards an expertise and a competency with these ideas. Um, and then hopefully I will continue along to the author artist, where I'm actually creating um, original artworks that make use of these practices and materials. Um, just for that, just kind of give you a level set on that and how this helps. If you could go to the next slide.
Sorry, I just have to let in one more person. 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay.
No problem. And so again, this is part of the model that we were taught to use, is within each of those levels, there's different competency building steps. So like initially I was I could visit, read, subscribe to resources. And now I've been working through the different levels that I can identify principles. I can start to utilize specific tools. And so I'm using, it's my own uh, model, but I'm using this to help me um, figure out what I need to do next overall in my practice. Next slide. And finally, stay in touch, everyone. It's my email, my Instagram. I have a Substack blog where I interview creatives. It's called Creatives Having Coffee. And the idea behind it is the creative, and I've had everyone from musicians to teachers to bakers to fine artists who have shared their stories, and the idea is to inspire others to find their own creative um, paths. And I just want to make it as an open invitation that if you decide, please take a look at the blog. If you decide that this is something you want to um, join me in, please contact me at the email and just let me know that you're through Eco Art Space.
Thank you, Robin. I wonder if you too want to speak briefly to your explorations with roots.
I didn't do enough with it to really be able to talk too much about it. I just got totally engrossed with the natural inks. And one thing I do want to make mention of, if you go to the Creatives Having Coffee, this current um, blog post is our one and only Anna Chapman sharing her story of her creative works. But no, I didn't do it, Anna. I didn't do enough with the roots to for yeah, I didn't.
Oh, it would have been great to show. I think people would have found it fascinating what you're up to and seen some of your paper sculptures. But it's nonetheless, I really appreciate how almost like a scientific approach you took in terms of communicating to us the steps you're taking and even charting out the a structure for like a path forward. And I almost feel like even in that work that you're doing there, you're becoming the ambassador of like creating this chart that helps guide other people through their process and understand like how they might devise their own path through this. Where are they heading? Right. Um, Robin, do you have any targeted questions for the audience?
The
Pressure.
one main thing that is part of my, looking forward is I'm looking at residencies that might be able to help me develop this competence, this expertise with the I'm kind of finding it to be inks and dyes tend
Mm.
to be along the same pathways. And so I'm just kind of looking for um, birds of a feather that I can learn from and share what I have been learning.
I can certainly offer some people that you might study under, but there's also so many great places, so many great residencies out there that are targeted towards the intersection of ecology and art. And Eco Art Space in their monthly newsletter at the bottom, they have residencies and opportunities and calls for artists. So that's also a good resource to check out on a monthly basis. But I studied under Carolyn Ross. I'm going to put her name in the
Thank
chat. She is in the UK, but she occasionally does come to the US to do workshops and does online workshops occasionally. She also is such a prolific Instagram user, and she's constantly sharing recipes, experiments, and she just put a book out that is really wonderful. But and she has she does a whole wide range of fine art, wildcrafted materials. But she certainly, I think one of the areas she's done the most research in is around inks. So I would certainly check her out.
Okay.
And Nick Netto too. I mentioned these in earlier in one of the classes, but Nick Netto is another good source. But I think Carolyn is better for ink recipes and ink processes. She's
Great.
really wonderful. Yeah, and I love this idea of the terroir.
Sure.
Um, oh, that's so good. And it's so cool. You have a background in geography too. I'm almost imagining like if you were to uh coordinate these on a map.
Mhm.
I had a student one time, Susan, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm forgetting her last name. She's an amazing photographer too, and she's in the Cleveland area, but she was wildcrafting uh crayons, ink, paint, um, and one other material, charcoal, all around the Cleveland area. And she created this map where she said exactly where she derived all of the materials. It was so beautiful.
Nice, nice. Yeah, one of my good friends is planning to move to the UK next year, and she's got a prolific uh, background, her backyard is full of all kinds of berries, plants and flowers and you name it. And so what we're doing is we're going to take the next 9 months to collect as they come into season her different plants and make inks out of those that we'll then together make a piece that when she goes to the UK, she'll have her an artwork that's made of her former house.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I do recommend doing light fast tests,
Yes.
especially with any colors, anything that's not really rich in tannins, which tend to be the browns, because those are much more light fast. However, if you're doing the lake pigment process, I think they will be much more light fast then. And
Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm doing that particularly with the copper oxides, but um, I'm not finding that it is a huge uh, barrier for me of the light fastness because part of the message that I'm hoping to get across to people is the fragility of our environment and that it has a expiration on it, if you will, that we can't just do anything we want to it and expect it to survive and remain. That we actually have to take care of it. We actually have to appreciate what we have.
absolutely, yeah.
So I'm kind of I'm I'm I agree with you about understanding the light fastness, but I'm not letting that deter me from using an ink.
No, wonderful. Yeah. And I've worked with many artists who feel the same way about it. And I think that's, yeah, beautiful to accept and make part as a part of the concept of the work, the impermanence of the materials you're working with. But sometimes people are just caught off guard. They're like, wait a minute, this beat ink is brown. And like 36 months later, what the heck? So I just like to make it known. But thank you so
Oh,
much.
no, and I agree with you. I agree with you that you have to be able to speak to it, but I'm not shying away from them, I guess is
Yeah, yeah, it's a beautiful
yeah.
physical metaphor about how we be with impermanence.
Anna, if you make me a co-host, I can let people in. You don't have to close
I'm
down your.
I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know how to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't want to waste anybody's time.
right beside the name Eco Art Space, it says you can click on it, the three dots, and make co-host.
It's not readily giving me that option, but I don't
Okay,
think we'll run into this issue
never
because
mind.
I'll be
Yeah.
presenting most of the rest. Okay, thank you. Can we get some claps and snaps for Robin? Christina, are you ready? So you're gonna
Thank
try
you.
and share.
That, I'm going to start just talking first, if that's okay. So thank you all for joining this presentation. I don't know how this is quite going to come across because I am in a very technical field in the sense of working with light in a photographic sense. And that probably colors everything I do. This has been a huge exploration in the sense of letting go all of this. Uh, and even though I have worked with archival and non-archival, the processes that I'm going to talk about today are many of them are completely ephemeral, which is quite exciting. Okay, let's see if I can manage. So if I share, does it? Okay.
Oh, Patricia.
You're gonna have to make her a co-host. So make me a host, or you.
She should be able to share without being a co-host, as Robin just did.
Oh,
Because
I,
right now multiple participants can share.
how did you do that?
That is under
Does
share.
that work? Did you see that?
No, unfortunately.
I've never done that. I always just give them co-host status. If your pointer is over someone's face that you want to do something with, a little blue box will show up on the right at the top.
Okay, I'm gonna
Three
see it
little
now. See
dots.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so Christina, you should be a co-host now, but I
Okay.
think that there might be another issue going on.
Okay, so now I hit, okay, share. Okay, one participant can share at a time.
Go ahead and make me a co-host though.
Okay. And if you aren't able to figure out Christina, we could have Jane go next and you could send me your
Okay, I'll do that.
presentation.
Let's just do that. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, no problem. Jane, are you ready? Awesome.
Hi everybody. I'll just see if I can share.
Okay. I can make everybody a co-host.
Is that sharing?
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Just get rid of the chat. Oh, is the meeting chat coming over the top?
Is the
I mean,
what?
the meeting chat coming over the top.
I'm not sure what you mean by the meeting chat. I no, oh no, I know what you mean. No, it looks great.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm exploring a plant as part of my project, but I'll just give you some background. So I'm a multidisciplinary visual artist, and my practice weaves together textiles, video, wearable art, community event creation, sonics, science, and biodiversity farming. I'm lucky to live in and am a steward of a remnant rainforest ecosystem in a regional part of the east coast of Australia on the lands of the Guringai people. You can see that where I am on this map on the right, and all around me is quite a denuded landscape. It's all due to clearing and timber extraction and cattle farming. So you can see my place there as a bit of a jigsaw piece. My property is a living studio. It's a biodiversity hotspot, and I have huge responsibility as an ecosystem steward. And I'm particularly aware of its fragility and precarity. For over 25 years, it's been a really steep learning curve with rainforest conservation and ecology. And over the last few years, my art focus has been about creatively engaging with the more than human world in the forest, creatively working with individual plants. And here's some stills from some video works where I've worked with a giant stinging tree and an indigofera shrub of the pea family. So my current plant, which I hope to also create videos with, but I'm creating some textile works with, is a hibiscus heterophyllus. It's a spindly small tree on the rainforest margins, and it's up to 6 metres high with these really beautiful showy white flowers with a really rich red centre. It's rough, sparse leaves that have multiple long lobes, and it's considered a bush food. The buds can be made for jam. So the top picks of our conservation practice and removing woody weeds and replacing them with the hibiscus heterophyllus. It's a great pioneer species because it's fast growing with a lifespan of only 5 to 10 years compared to the hundreds of years of rainforest species. So it's really suitable for regeneration projects, and because it cycles quickly with breaking down after it's died. And allowing for other mature phase species to come through. So with this one here, there's only a small, a medium-sized tree. I've felled it and debarked it. Depending on the weather conditions, it's really easy to peel off as the moisture layer in the periderm layer just under the bark is very moist. So I can peel it straight off. But if I leave it too long, it'll dry and become well, it's like glue. And this is showing the length of the tree that I've debarked. And I'm after the fibre in the bark. So the next stage here, on the left-hand side, I've just been experimenting with taking off the top bark to see if that will help with the retting process. And retting is RET, and that's where it's I'm putting it in water. I'll just go back to that one. I'm putting it in water for a few weeks, and it's the natural bioenzymes that it creates that breaks down the pectin, lignin, and hemicellulose in the bark. So that's at the beginning. I've made four buckets with doing different things with each one. This is day 14. It's a bubbly, skanky sludge. So you can see the natural bioenzymes doing their work.
Jane, just a quick question. When you say you're doing different things with each of the 4 buckets, what are the different things you're doing?
So with 2 of the buckets, I did, whoops, I just come back here. I did take off the outer bark with a couple of them. And then the other 2 buckets, well, also because there's too much material to fit in the buckets, but the other buckets, I didn't take the outer bark off, and I also put in some wallaby poo into one of them just to see, because wallabies are small kangaroos that I have around me, and they're eating, they're herbivores, they only eat grass and stuff, so it would just be their natural enzymes that would help with this process. So as you can see in this image, it's really quite skanky, really gooey, quite stinky, but not too stinky. It's a very, broken down cellulose smell. So it's not too bad in terms of smell. This is day 14. I was experimenting with like tupper cloth, actually banging the cloth to see if that would expand the bark or whether it would soften it. And on the right hand side, you can see it's quite white, shiny fibers that it's creating. And I did start to notice that when I was just playing around with it, that the bark was coming apart in these different layers, which you'll see later is really quite interesting. This is around day 28, so around 4 weeks. This is more, it's not bubbling so much anymore, but you can still see it's a bit quite skanky on the top, and the smell's not too bad. So this is where I'm taking it out after 4 weeks. Quite gooey. I did roll it up into, just to make it a bit more manageable, which I've also learnt from, not to tie it up together, or else you get quite a felted mess. With this one, you can see that this one I didn't take off the top bark, and it has already started delaminating into those layers. As you can see with this one, it's still got the bark on it, but I actually didn't need to take it off in that very first image. It is starting to, just with my glove, I can rub it off and it's starting to come off, and you can start to see the fibers of the different layers. Then I rinsed it off and hung it out to dry. And you can see it's really quite white here. And here's a close-up of one of those ribbons. And you can really see the cell structures. And even in some parts you see bigger holes where there would have been a branch or small branches in places. So these are the types of materials I was able to get. I was able to get the longer ribbons, then more strands, and then the really small fibers. I thought in the past I've used it, and I've made a cordage out of it. So I thought I would do that with the longer strands, and then with the fine pieces, I would see if I can make that into paper, but I haven't made any paper at this stage. But I thought the long fibre structures would be really handy to put in moulds and either make paper or sculptural works. I was also starting to play around with just the light and shadow of, just because the cell structure is so beautiful with those ribbons. So I've got a couple of images of playing around with shadows with those works. And you can see in this image where there was a really obvious a branch coming out. Then I've started to create some small works just to experiment with it. So I've started sewing it together just in a really simple, flat way to start off with. I'm hoping that with hand sewing, I'll be able to create quite sculptural forms or glue it together, or yeah, I'm not sure how. This is just the very beginning of my exploration. Weaving it and also putting some, tipping the ends with colour. You can't tell with this image, unfortunately, it's quite flat, but it's a really quite, the light really bounces off it. It's quite reflective and quite shiny, the ribbon. This is a really old work that I'd done where I'd just been using it as cordage and had woven with it. The strands coming out is lamandra. It's a native local grass. So just some other things, some ideas. This is a work that I'm working on with a textile work with punch needle and rug making, with my ideas around aerial landscapes and viewing landscapes from above. I'm hoping that I will incorporate some of the hibiscus heterophyllus and diet and incorporate it into some of these types of works. This is another work I've been working on with aerial landscapes, and this is a sound coat that I've created. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to weave it into these pieces, but I'm just not sure how it will go at this stage because it's still early stages. This is the wood from the centre, and on the right-hand side is the bark from the outside. So I'll also work with that. It's very light. I've tried carving it, but it's not great to carve with the tools that I had. So I'll keep experimenting with that. On the right-hand side, you can see these are the large sticks. I mean, they're quite tall. They're 1.5 to 2 meters tall, depending on where I cut them down. So I'll be using those in sculptural works. In the past, I've made sculptural works with some of the wire and leftover farm materials like fencing wire, and I also make felt. So I imagine using the sticks within that capacity as well. So I'm trying to use all the different parts of the plants and keep experimenting with it. And then also to make some video and sound works in the future. Oops, I'll just unshare if I can stop sharing. So that's pretty much, is that stop sharing?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Jane.
That's that experiment. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I love the pivot into just deep fascination and wonder you took with just starting to look at the shadows and like the structure of the membrane. And yeah, I'm excited. You have such a multifaceted practice. I could see you going in so many different directions with how you integrate this into your interdisciplinary practice. And I love the idea of using the sticks too as some sort of structural component to it. I wonder if anybody has any particular comments. There's certainly a few in the chat, a lot of beautiful, breathtaking comments. I love the coat. Petra just said, I love the experimentation to use all aspects of the plant for different sensory experiences.
Thank
Anybody
you.
have any comments they want to share in particular? Yeah, Christina, go for it.
I was quite interested after were you expecting the detail of the cell structure when you did the fermentation?
No, definitely not. Having played with other plants, I did see the cell structure to a degree, but I didn't think that I'd be able to keep it. I thought that it
Mhm.
would break up, or certainly if I start shredding, oops, I've just got some here. Certainly if I start shredding it,
Mm.
it will just go into strands. It's incredibly strong. Just
Wow.
really, I can't. I have to
Wow.
actually. I can't. Um,
Wow, that's amazing. It would make for incredible cordage.
yeah. So I'll go back to making some cordage with some of it, but I'm just loving the ribbon cell structures and imagining. I'm hoping to do some sculptures where it's quite fluid, but that's more experimentation to come. I'll keep you posted in a year, I suppose.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, we should have a reunion, a Sustainability in the Art Studio reunion.
I haven't quite rinsed it enough. It's still a bit stinky, but it's not too bad.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jane.
Yeah.
I appreciate how in depth you've recorded your process too. It's especially for those who are not familiar with the process of retting, to be able to see that step by step was really wonderful. It's so simple too. You're just using water. Did you find, because I know you did the 4 different buckets and experiments, did you find the outcomes really varied much? Or did you find a particular method that worked best that you'll be using moving forward?
I won't be taking the top of the bark off.
Yeah.
The I just don't need to. And in fact, I think that those buckets are much more successful because there's more material to break down. I
Ah,
didn't
yeah.
notice in particular that the wallaby poo helped. Maybe it helped speed up in the early stages, but I'm not sure that it wouldn't have harmed, but I'm not sure that I'd love to know how to test that in a way, but
Mm.
I'm not familiar with that.
Beautiful. Well, keep us posted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. All right. Yeah, let's get some claps. Snaps. And Christina, I did receive your email, so just give me a moment. I'm going to pull your presentation up. Okay, here we go.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hello, everyone. Um, Today I'm at, um, in or at our home, which is an oceanic rainforest in the west of Ireland. The title Grian Graf is the Irish for photography, sun, Grian, and graph, like a graphic image. I was inspired, firstly, to look at perhaps the question of whether there was an environmentally sustainable way of using gold leaf, particularly. But as I began to just barely research, it came to me, and I don't that the big question is all of the processes that as an analog image maker have been using all these years because we live a very sustainable life here for the past 35 years, rewilding a tiny bit of Ireland. I was very quickly aware of what was going into the ground from my processes. So I had started uh, being very careful, recycling, uh, keeping chemicals away from going back into the earth and bringing them to the proper recycling. But that did not actually uh, actually uh, kind of fit the life that we created here as organic growers with biodynamic certification using Rudolf Steiner's amazing teachings, which connects the cosmos, the earth, and man together. So the question moved from gold leaf particularly to whether there is an environmentally sustainable way of working with photography. This question is very big. So today I'm only going to talk about analog processes. Let's turn the page, please. Here are some of my inspirations over time, and also some of the processes that I've been using. I use a lot of large format cameras. I use lensless cameras where you don't know what you're seeing, so you're feeling the photograph before it's made. Cyanotype and cyanotype toning is actually a very non-toxic method. But as I did my research, I came upon the work of a UK-based sustainable darkroom. And this group was an offshoot from the Alternative Photography Collective in London. They really were, their question and what they were looking at was the hegemonic capitalistic toxic processes involved with silver gelatin based technologies. And they were asking, is there another way of doing it? And how do we go forward? It has meant going back to the beginning of photography, to the very first proponents and workers in creating this field. But this group were looking at not just non-toxic, but they furthered the question into looking at like the more than human world and connecting that with light and like light gathering, a moment in time. What they realized very quickly was that we can do a page turn, that actually photochemicals are mostly based on, believe it or not, vitamin C, ascorbic acid, and sodium carbonate. They realized that by adding a plant extraction, which is a phenolic material, that would do what the more toxic chemicals do. So they began to, this group began to experiment and communicate with each other about what they were doing and how it was working. What they found out was that phenols, which is the plant material, is actually a way of using the season, the temperature, the humidity, and the actual energy of a plant, whether it's flowering, fruiting, or leafing, in a very specific way that creates the development that we need for our film. Next page, please.
Christina, just a quick question. Would you have different results whether the plant was flowering, fruiting, etc.? Would it?
Okay, I've done what I did was I interviewed.
Okay.
So I interviewed people who had done quite a lot of work with this, specifically Hannah Fletcher. And how she explained it was well, first off, that it's really important to use plant material that is not uh, subjected to pesticides or other kinds of herbicide, because in those circumstances, the plant has not actually created a response to the environment. And
Mm.
so yeah, so it's really interesting. So first off, it's really great to use like homegrown organic uh, material. And the other thing is that you start to find out that you can freeze this material. So if you pick carefully, that's also about foraging, so never more than 10% of a plant, and being very careful not to take out the tops. But that in your foraging, that you could like create a bit more like connection from one development to another by using the same material several times if it works for you. So they do use freezing, for example. You can also dry material, but freezing seems to be a quite viable way of keeping the potency. So it looks just like it looks exactly like making dye. But here I went into the darkroom for the first time with a straw basket and plant material. And that was the first thing. There was no smell of the darkroom. And it was extraordinary. I've now done this at home, that the toxicity is no longer there in the same way at all, which is just so, for me, enlivening, as you know, having been working with organic growing all these years. So, but at the same time, you're doing the weighing, you're doing the combining, and it's the combining of the different the sorbic acid with the sodium carbonate. It creates chemical reactions, which then make the plant extraction alive as a developer. So for my first test, okay, we can page turn. I have also, I can send this as a PDF, but for the first test, I did the extraction, I did a recipe, and after all the time and work, I came out with a black piece of film. So then we'll turn the page. I continued to do research, and I came on to a very interesting man who has done a publication for sustainable darkroom called Back to Basics, which I'm gonna have to go blank out. But anyway, his work. Okay, Andres Pardo. He came up with a recipe called Simple 3, and we can go to the next page. In Simple 3, after doing my tests and asking the questions, I realized it was too hot, and perhaps I needed first off to make a good extraction. So I did an extraction that was like with boiling water and overnight, but actually kept it for 6 days steeping before straining. And his Simple 3 adds bicarbonate of soda to the ascorbic acid before adding the sodium carbonate. And what he explained was that you had a longer window where the film didn't overdevelop. So that was important to me because I thought, you know, how do I get some control here? And here there's all these different processes because you do a drop test in light with the formulation, and as it changes, you time it, and that timing gives you the minutes of the development time. Another contributor to the sustainable darkroom has contributed that it's a good idea to make then a clip test with various times from that initial assertion. So that's what I did this time. And then I developed the final 2/3 of a reel of film according to the time there. Okay, we can turn the page. I also made salt fix, which is a salt extraction. So I used seawater, which I boiled down to crystal. And then I added that crystal to seawater to make a completely saturated solution. The second roll of film was salt fix for over a period of 24 hours and with agitation and bringing it up to the very high temperature of 30 degrees Celsius. After 24 hours, I opened the film canister and it was not cleared, which so I very hastily closed it and fixed it with a non-hardening sodium thiosulfate fixer, which the Sustainable Darkroom, Hannah Fletcher, says is a very positive, low toxicity fixer. You have a much softer surface, so you have to take care of your film, but you don't have the toxic chemicals. So they very often use like a sodium thiosulfate rather than like doing the salt fix. Okay, we turn the page. So this was after my complete black film. This was the black film, the rest of the reel done, developed in normal fixer. And as this was Soda Lake on the Carrizo Plain in California, and so that's all sodium carbonate. But it's a national heritage site, so I did not pick up any to use in my process. So this is just to show what the black film actually had on the reel that went black. Okay, we can turn the page. Now this is the second test. And you will see that there's a bit of staining and mottling. And Hannah and I looked at it and we don't know whether it was because when I put the sodium thiosulfate in after the 24 hours of salt, that there was a slight time delay or whatever, that it stained it. This is again the Carrizo Plain, the Salt Lake. But I was very happy to see that there was nice contrast. If you go back one, we'll go back. Do you see how they are very similar? Okay, go forward again to the next one, please. I was very happy that we have good contrast. That was another question as a image maker. The gradation of the film is really important to me. Reading further, it turns out that people actually use 48 hours of salt fix. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. Would this process have developed color film?
So they're doing reversal and reversal film they have done. And I'm going to a workshop in September in Bristol where they're looking at color and color developing and printing and printmaking. But they're also looking at what is the three process layers of gum bichromate. They're also looking at non-toxic formulations for iron using recycled iron. I find it just so exciting. They also are doing vegan gelatin, like for gelatin based. And like, for example, in the future, I have old paper, which is also a great resource, but instead of buying new plasticized papers, I will be following on how I've done with like my calotype and cyanotype, hand making silver emulsion on nice whatever paper that works with it, whether it's a rag paper or whatever. So like I am really walking away from the whole it's really, for me, it's very positive. And it's just incredible to have a non-toxic developer. The
Yeah.
other thing is that people all over the world are doing these processes using waste veg from the dump, the tip, the dumpster diving, or they use it from their garden, or they connect the photograph with they collect plant material from where they're making their images. So it's a really burgeoning, exciting process
Mm.
from my point of view. Please turn the page. Okay, this is Alice Cazenove, who some of you might know, and she has had a grant and worked intensively on land that Kodak had like stripped and made barren. And she's here worked with another photographer as well as working with the peoples of the unceded lands of these completely over time wastelands from Kodak. This is this is done with white corn and lye. And it was part of an exhibition at the Create Gallery.
Wow.
And Alice is really strongly looking at this hegemonic uh, twist and how it's affected the unceded lands of the USA.
Hmm.
Okay, page turn. This is a photographer, artist who showed at Form and Concept in Santa Fe several years ago. And she kind of connected her disability with reframing and she has a degenerative illness. And she used, these are phyto prints, and they are extremely ephemeral. They were actually in black boxes. Each of these images were in a black box covered with black velvet that you opened up to look at the image and then you covered. She did do scans of the images because they change very quickly. So she did have another way of record. She did record it for posterity. But phytograms are extraordinary. The detail you can get printing directly onto chlorophyll, i.e., leaves.
Wow. Talk about embracing impermanence. It's a powerful piece.
We can turn the page. This is Dr. Melanie King, who's been very big part of the group in the UK. And she's been, as a scientist, she works a lot with the land and also with the cosmos, but she has primarily been working with seaweed-based developers, which I'm really interested in. So these extraordinary images, the prints were developed in seaweed extraction with gin.
Hmm.
Okay, next. This is Hannah Fletcher. And so here's another, on the right-hand side, this is another chlorophyll print work. It looks like you can see the layering of leaves, and then the image printed into that. And this is on the left, this is more of she also has worked with things like kombucha and, all kinds of fermentation kind of ways of creating photographic process. Okay. So this is a bit of information on the Sustainable Darkroom, the London Alternative Photography, the Compendium of Extraordinary Uses of Materials. I don't know if anyone's found that. It's completely interesting and odd and out there. Okay, next, let's see if we have anything. I think it's going to be thank you. So this is what I'm going to explore, the low toxicity iron and color processes petrichor developer, i.e. rain, and the smell of rain and earth. You can make a extraction of it, literally. seaweed developer. And I just wish to give my deep thanks to Anna Chapman and ecoartspace Patricia. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christina. I'm just going to leave this up for a moment in case anybody wanted to make note of these references here. That was so wonderful, Christina. What an extensive overview of the processes you're exploring. And as I mentioned, Patricia, to Christina earlier, that I've had so many photographers come through the class in the past, wondering how do I find a sustainable approach to these chemical processes. And it's not photography is not my background. I didn't have too many resources to point them to in the direction. Oftentimes they would end up looking towards cyanotype or cutting back on flying other places to do shoots, for example. So cutting back on their carbon footprint and focusing on more local projects. But yeah, I have a sense that there's so many photographers out there who are trying to figure this out, and it would be so helpful to hear the presentation you just gave. It's so extensive. It's wonderful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you.
There are quite a few comments in the chat, and Kate, a few from yours as well at the end that I realize I missed, including a question from Robin, which I apologize for missing that. Would anybody like to voice a comment?
So I've seen Christina's work here at a gallery in Santa Fe this last year, which was really incredibly gorgeous. So that you're taking this class and yeah, trying to come up with like using rosemary is just, I think that's magical. To use plants to, we have a couple other members who do use, uh, have natural processes for doing the developing. So I should probably like connect you all in an email. But I know Mary Mattingly would have liked to have heard your talk today, and I'm sure she'll watch the recording.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe she will. Sorry, I'm just reading through the comments. Is there any part of the process that you enjoyed most?
It was pretty hard. It's like you develop 3 times for every role at this point. Um, and it's really good because I mean there are so many different layers. I mean, I've realized I was looking at, for example, this is going sideways, but I was looking at the cloud, and then I read that putting things in the cloud, the machines are running day and night. You know, the electric
Uh-huh.
generators and the
Yeah,
whatever. It's extraordinary. So at
yeah,
the moment with digital, it's just such a huge uh, unfathomable change, and there's a lot of pollution involved with all of this, and it's also on such a huge stick scale because everyone has a smartphone. I mean, you, at this point, it feels like. So it's kind of like tilting at windmills doing analog, but
yeah. I really appreciate you drawing that connection to contemporary like technology as well and how we're reproducing images. Um, Thank you so much, Christina. It's really exciting. And I'd love to keep us posted how I would love to hear how your explorations go with color and moving forward. Yeah, it's really wonderful. So last but not least, we have a presentation that Mary Mattingly, who is going, oh, sorry, wait, let's do our round of applause for well deserved for Christina. Uh, Last but not least, we have a recorded presentation by Mary Mattingly, who is going to join us, but was unfortunately unable to at last minute. So do still leave some comments. I'll read them out so that she can hear them. Um, and I will let me know how the sound is on this. Hopefully that will not be an issue. Okay. Wait, let me see if I can make
So
this.
thanks, Anna, for allowing me to be part.
Let me try to make this full screen. Sorry. Sorry, we might have to watch it in my email box here. Doesn't seem to want to pull out as a separate file. I'm going to make it as large as I can. Okay, here we go.
Course and great cohort, and I learned a lot from it. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person right now to do this presentation. I hope that it kind of translates through this recording. But I wanted to start by introducing a project I've been working on for a long time called Swale. It's launched in 2016 with the help of the grant and a Kickstarter campaign, but it began with a question that I guess I could not shake. If food and water are our most basic needs, how did they come to feel so decentered from collective care, and how could art support a different way of living in relation to them? So Swale came out of a frustration. It began because I was diagnosed with celiac disease and I had to change my diet and move towards fresh food. It's also angry to learn that community garden in my neighborhood had closed down to make way for a new development. And then meanwhile, access to fresh, healthy food was growing more expensive. Across the city, we were in a food crisis. So that tension between, I think, the scarcity and the possibility of abundance, between erasure and the potential for something more permanent, meant I thought public parks could be an answer, one of many answers. So New York City has about 100 acres of community garden space. Many are managed by Green Thumb, which is part of New York City Parks. But the city also cares for about 30,000 acres of public parkland that have a different set of uses. So it's been off limits to forage in New York public parks for about 100 years because the department's worried that many people, if they were foraging simultaneously, would harm a fragile ecosystem. And then they also have new concerns around the safety of soil, around potentially people picking the wrong part of a plant. So there are a lot of relevant concerns that need to be addressed for this to make sense and be part of the ecosystem that supports access to fresh, healthy food in the city. But they're not insurmountable. So folks interested in the idea wondered what it would take to be able to safely and collectively harvest food on public land, and if a project could model a space that allowed for that kind of access and reciprocity. If it worked, they could do more. So it was to be a floating food forest, and it would get permission from New York City Parks through being framed as a sculpture built on a barge. It was mobile, and because it relied upon the common law of the water, it could be a public space that wasn't only governed by the same land-based restrictions. So that legal loophole of being on the water would be key. And it meant that Swale could dock adjacent to public parks and could invite people to harvest perennial fruits and vegetables and herbs without breaking any public land laws. So to take root in this shifting system, Swale had to serve multiple purposes. So that was sort of built into the idea at the beginning. It would be a sculpture, it would be a food source, it would be a green space, an educational platform, a public gathering site, among other things. So designing that sort of layers of functionality into the sculpture from the beginning could increase its resilience and its relevance, we hoped. And then I get just a little bit of the background. It was able to happen not just because it framed itself as a public artwork, but because of a prior project that had been able to happen in some of the same peers that I was involved in. So knowing about those water rules and having relationships with people and community groups in those particular small parks around the city was really key to to sort of paving the way for Swale to be something that could help in coalition building. It could be a platform, as well as exercise its own use as a place for people to forage from. So I'll just say Swale was used in many different ways, and it came about because of a prior project that had been able to follow some of those same water-based regulations, or learn about them through a prior project. It's important to understand this was like what a food forest is. It's an agroforestry method where companion plants are used to support each other and kind of help one another grow stronger and more plentiful each year. So of course they're all perennial plants, and most of them, but not all of them, are food bearing. It follows traditional ecological knowledge, and insights from people like social scientist Eleanor Ostrom, who claimed that in a vibrant commons, people have a role to play not only as a beneficiary, but also as a co-creator, as a protector, and as a decision maker in the space. So as the project evolved, it would change, and it would the plants would change depending on what people planted as they came on. People didn't only pick, but they also planted. The longer that swale could be in place, the stronger and more robust the plant system would be. So here's an image from the first year, and then here's a photo from the second year. You can see it's much more lush, and you could imagine that if it could have continued for many, many years, it would be even more lush, even though it's on a floating platform. I think, I wanted to also mention that there's an experience. Oftentimes, young people came on board first and sort of brought their families, other caretakers along with them later, and sort of helped in the process of convincing people that this was an interesting idea. You could imagine as an artwork, there's an experience of walking onto a floating vessel that's moving back and forth, and you're not used to the movement, but after spending some time, you do get used to the movement, and then you can look at the exterior off the floating platform, and you see that everything else around you is moving, but you sort of feel centered and grounded and like you're in a good place. So I think that perceptual transition is potentially part of the artwork, but it was really part of also the way that people felt like they could engage in this idea, not only in the space, but also in the idea. And this is some of the plants that we grew, but also some of the plants that people came on board with and said that they would be interested in harvesting more of these. So we sort of took a tally of what plants people actually would like to harvest if this was in their public park. And this is something that is now being used for the new iteration of this project. So as I'm working towards the second version that could be longer lasting, I'm referring to this planting tally, essentially. Some additional images. We didn't know how long the first version would last, came with a certain amount of funding to be able to start with, but then understood that if we could not continue after a certain amount of time, we would return the barge to the owner and move the plants to particular places around the city. And so it was able to continue until 2019. We returned the barge to the owner at the beginning of the pandemic and moved the plants to Concrete Plant Park in the Bronx, where the city decided that they would be willing to start the first foodway, which is only a 7-acre area where people can come and harvest fruits and vegetables for free 24 hours a day. So it is the Parks Department sort of breaking with their old rule, giving this a try and saying, we will do more of this if there is enough community engagement in another place. So here are images from that foodway launch. You can see sort of what it looks like now. So today, and why I took the class, many of the people involved in Swale are working toward the next phase of more permanent community-owned floating garden. And the question now is not just, what grows, but how we share the responsibility in a different way. How we share it through a collectively held structure that's maybe legally informed for shared stewardship, for longer term care, and for more adaptive resilience. In the second phase of the floating component, we're designing the project as infrastructure, not only as artwork, but more as infrastructure, thinking about how it can be more attached to a couple of different land bases. And I guess what I've learned from the first iteration and what I'm thinking through collectively on the second is that groups and individuals with different missions can find ways to align, which seems obvious, but maybe needs to be restated. B, that co-creation requires shared ownership, even if it's just partial. C, that maintenance is often more important than the initial impulse. If this had only been able to get off the ground for a couple of months, it wouldn't have been as impactful, certainly. And the fact that it needs to sort of keep improving upon itself is part of the process of maintenance that we've learned is almost more essential than that initial impulse. And then finally, I think a project like this and hopefully this next iteration could be more successful if years later people remember the impact but not the authors. And that is, we're really trying to decenter the ownership and also really attach this to a nonprofit that's already working in the space of the water adjacent to public parks, who can be the long-term owners and stewards or the collective caretakers. So I guess I'm here today to think through this new vessel that it looks like we're almost able to fully purchase. We put the down payment down on it and are raising the rest of the funds to be able to fully purchase it. And I'm here today to say that I am here with the commitment to keep practicing together, to treat the floating garden, I guess, not only as a platform for plants and people, but a platform for this continuity. And in Anna's class, I've been working on the planting plan and the next phase, and rooting what we've grown and reaching toward, I guess, what comes next. So it feels like we're in this very in-between space where there's a lot of planning happening. We'll be able to build in September and hopefully launch in upstate New York in the early to middle of next spring. So just thank you for your time, and I'm going to stop the share, and I look forward to seeing the recording of this and answering any questions or being part of the conversation later. And again, sorry that I can't be here right now.
Oh, that was wonderful. I wonder if anybody, I have some thoughts and comments, but if anybody would like to share theirs as well. A few comments from the chat are, thanks for sharing this amazing work you all are doing. Sadly, I have to leave. Wow, somebody was echoing your question in the beginning, Mary, at the beginning of your presentation. I don't remember what that was. They were just taken by that. Thank you for these deeply insightful and generous presentation. And yeah, I love this. But yeah, what an incredible project that is so deeply rooted in community. And I really appreciate the iterations that you've gone through and learned that you are adapting and centering in your next iteration of like, how do we have a strategic plan around this that is sustainable and like has caretakers and being able to pass the authorship on to someone outside of yourselves and so that it can sustain itself. I also, something else that was coming up was I recently facilitated a panel discussion around art and social care, art and mutual aid. And one of the questions we were sort of dancing around was like, how do we do movement building, movement work together? How do we sustain this? And one of the people, Jeff Casper, who's sort of a seasoned community arts facilitator, was talking about how in organizing and movement work from his experience, there has to be a capacity to come together with a collective come he was sorry, let me rephrase this. He was saying that some of the most sustainable projects that he's been part of are groups that can hold a diversity of priorities. So people, and it sort of echoed something that you were saying towards the end of your presentation, Mary, who's going to listen to this later. Just around bringing people together who have different priorities, but you're collectively doing this thing together. And so Jeff was sort of saying that that's so much more sustainable from his experience. And this is sort of echoed in a number of the other participants, including Susan Jehoda, that is a much more sustainable approach than trying to rally everyone to sort of live or die towards this one thing. And yeah, I think that sort of reflects the biodiversity of non-human ecosystems and like how these plants are interacting and being present together on this barge, right? But it's such a beautiful project, and it's one of those projects where I feel like the art is in meeting all of the sort of random challenges that come up and just being able to ride the waves of that, and that is the work, is like learning how to how do you sort of land this plane in a really complex ecosystem, and like in terms of community industry versus the not non-human realm, and then also community, like a super diverse ecosystem living so close to in the heart of like New York City, which is one of the most radically diverse human populations in the world. So yeah, I just feel like if you can make this work in that context, it's such a wonderful um, model for doing something that is responsive to its own context in different areas. So I just really admire the research and the work that you're doing collectively too, in this project. And yeah, would anybody else like to share anything else or any for Mary, and then also or any closing comments for the group as a whole? No pressure. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank everybody so much for coming. And just to reiterate, I think that not I think we will be running this course again in the fall. So if anybody is interested, I got a message from Daniela that she's interested in the fall course. Patricia, I'll link you guys later. Yeah, so we'll be running it again in the fall. And for those who are watching the recording who are in the class but were unable to make it, I think we might try to put together some kind of a sixth class because so many didn't get to present. So we'll just do our own little thing on the side and connect, and maybe just have a little open dialogue about how everything went. Um, yeah, because I'm it's unfortunate how many weren't able to make it who just had incredible projects too, that I would have loved to have shared and have some dialogue around. So thank you all so much for coming, and
And
yeah. Oh yeah,
thank
go.
you, Anna, and Patricia, Eco Art Space, for this incredible opportunity. It's been amazing to engage and connect with all these artists that are doing really fascinating work on so many different levels. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that comment. And every time I teach this class, it's the ecosystem of the artist. Like, yes, there's research that I'm bringing into it, but what always makes it such a remarkable class and experience is all of the different perspectives, experiences, research that everybody else is doing in the class to create this little ecosystem of its own that's just so generative. So I just want to also echo a thank you to everything that you guys have brought to the course because I'm constantly learning from you guys too. So thank you. And yeah, Robin said I've so enjoyed the course. I didn't know it was going to come out of it, but it's honestly been life-changing. So sweet. Great presentations. I love the course. So much sharing and learning. Amazing presentations. Thank you for the incredible work you are all doing. So last round of applause for Mary and everybody. Thank you all so much. Have a great summer. Take care. Bye.